Yeah. So welcome everyone. So for this particular edition, we'll be discussing about the crisis in Sudan, which has been something that um, um, has bordered on the challenges of transition. If you remember, in 2019, the military planned a coup to remove the Sudan President Omar al-Bashir, who was
Yes.
seen as a dictator, Yeah. And they took over the the affairs of the country. Two generals, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, two of these guys, took over the affairs. And as is expected, when there is a bit of a power play, so there are lots of disagreements on certain things. One of the things I think that they are disagreeing on, if I could just give a brief introduction to that, is on the transition process to civilian rule and how to make it work. But and on, of course on the power sharing formula and some other things. But what I think is important in this crisis is the fact that what happens in most situations of conflict is to create like a makeshift arm of the military paramilitary agency.
Mhm.
In the case of Sudan, they have the RSF, and the RSF were brought in to support the military in order to be able to manage the security challenges, in the country. But now the military has felt, under threat that the RSF is becoming more prominent, within perhaps more influential than Nigeria, than the Sudanese military. And so I think it was because of a bit of disagreement between these two forces that brought about the kinds of challenges that we're having in Sudan at the moment. So um, what has happened? So the RSF, I think the full meaning of that is the Rapid Support Forces. I just wanted to check that quickly, so
Yeah.
that we know how it was formed. So the RSF, from what I gather, was formed in 2013. Of course, if you remember part of the history of Sudan, the RSF is thought to have emerged from the Janjaweed militia.
Janjaweed, exactly.
Yes, and they've been accused of bias when it comes to ethnic targeting of ethnic groups, in Sudan, and it has a bit of worried, a bit of an intrepid, or a bit of a ruthless history. Of course, amid there are also some kind of external forces at play. I just want to give like a broad introduction before our guy joins us. I'm hoping he'll join us. So I will allow you to also make your own intervention. Not necessarily on Sudan, but on security issues generally. I know
Okay.
that Russia is, so why I think is also relevant within the global scheme of things is the participation of Russia, in the affairs of Sudan, to say that there are a lot of Russian mercenaries or Russian activities in the country at the moment. Of course, Russia has been projected to have attempted to start a military base, in Sudan. That's apart from the exploration of gold from and the running of gold mines, in the country. So there is a lot of economic interest that has led to several human rights abuses by these rapid support forces, in Sudan at at uh, at the time. So I'm hoping that our discussion will look at the security in general, the role of paramilitary forces, when it comes to the management of security across different contexts, and how, if these forces are poorly managed, how they come to become threats, to the state when it comes to its own, political stability, and also how the economic impact, the economic indicators of some of these crises. So this is what I hope we'll be able to touch on, within today.
Professor.
So if it's just me and you, then I'm sure we can still come up with very vital points that will help lead to a production of a communique, for this person. So I'm grateful that you joined us, Kwesi, and I'm hoping that we will have a very, very important meeting. So I think I'll just allow you to make your intervention. Yeah.
Okay, I think from the little I understand, I also want to use Sudan first. I think it's more like the Frankenstein monster, where
Mm,
you create a monster and it comes back to hunt you.
yeah.
And I think, as you said, it's about the struggle is also about economic benefits. Currently about 80% of the oil is now in South Sudan, but
Yeah.
Sudan's the north still controls the refineries. So still
Yeah.
all the oil comes through Sudan.
Yeah.
So still the oil factor, the money that comes from the oil is still at play. And whoever controls
Mm,
this also has a leverage over when it comes to financial power over other forces in the state. So I think it's
exactly.
more of, and also Sudan also has a lot of also gold reserves and other resources. So
Yeah.
I think both parties would want to have a greater control over the state so that it can, as it were, exploit the resources. But I think it also has a regional dimension. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
have I have a friend here who's also a PhD, who's from Ethiopia, and he tells
Okay.
me I think Ethiopia is supporting the Rapid Special Forces.
Ah.
Yes, with ammunition, weapons, and those. And so it's like this.
Mm,
They are well backed financially and also by resources. So it's not something
mm,
that they can be swept over easily. The
yeah.
Sudan military force can just sweep over them. They are well equipped, and I think
Mm,
so. This also, in a way, I think it also plays a very important role in how the conflict will be resolved. Because once they are
yeah.
powerful, they will still want to project some power. And if they should
Yeah.
engage in negotiation, they will want a lion's share or a very lucrative, let's say, opportunity or a share of the national cake, which
Yeah.
also which will still come down to exploitation of society. It's not about they are not fighting to liberate Sudan from external forces, but rather take control and exploit the Sudanese people and their resources. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. So this is very interesting. And I love the fact that you are bringing in the regional, angle to it, which to be honest, I wasn't thinking in that direction. But I also know that, for instance, there has been a lot of ethnic and warring crisis in Ethiopia, I think in the past 2 or 3 years, where the Oromos, of course, have always been persecuted, and there's a bit of a challenge when it comes to. I think there was a time they said the rebels were moving towards Addis Ababa, and the prime minister, the president, had to like negotiate his way out of it. So the point I'm trying to make is whereas there could also have been some sort of support or recruitment of members of these rapid support forces by the Ethiopians in trying to fight their own, as it has happened in some parts of East Africa. When you talk about the crisis in Uganda in the past, and now that spiraled over to Rwanda, perhaps Burundi, and some of these other. So there's always like a spread, an horizontal spread of conflict situations when it comes to um, um, challenges of struggle for political power, either um, through the creation of a non-state arm, often regarded as rebels, against a sitting government, or in the case of Sudan now, where you have two generals who are in power, striving to create dominance or or project themselves. So I totally agree with this. I also want to point out a very important angle to this crisis, which was the part of evacuation. I don't know how much you followed it, but from my own angle, we were also following the process of evacuation of Nigerians, from South Sudan at the moment, in terms of creating a humanitarian corridor for people to have safe passages, out of Sudan. And the point I'm trying to make is also that, as in every conflict, the key those that are mostly affected, the key population, if I could use that word in this context, that are affected are always the civilian population, as has happened in Ukraine, even outside of the continent. We're seeing in Sudan that a lot more casualties, thousands of civilians have been recorded to have been killed, within this context. In Nigeria, I think we have a lot of students, Nigerian students from the northern part of the country, of course, because of perhaps not, let me not be stereotypical, but a lot of Nigerians feel that because of the Islamic um, the dominance of the Islamic religion in Sudan, then a lot of people from the north who are predominantly Muslims, according to some argument, are attracted to school there. But that kind of a position has been negated, because there has been a point that Sudan has a lot of historical tradition when it comes to relevance within the academia. I am not an expert in this, I must confess to you. But the point I'm trying to make is these students became very vulnerable, and they had to be evacuated from the country. Now, outside of the Sudanese context, what we experience in Nigeria is the fact that the government was not as responsive enough as they ought to be, in bringing these students out of danger. So we saw a lot of them being stranded across the Sahara Desert. We saw there was even a video on Twitter where students were complaining that the drivers that had been contacted were not being paid, and that so they stopped driving them. They stopped at the Sahara and said that if they are not paid the balance, of the agreement, then they are not going to proceed. There was also the challenge of how to about the landing sites for planes, in Egypt, where these students were supposed to be evacuated to. So because Egypt had to protect its own territory, it wouldn't want the buses to drive through certain parts of Egypt, and so they had to be negotiating what airport, the Nigerian um, the Nigerian craft aircrafts could land, to evacuate some of, and even how many landings the plane could make. But one very vital thing that I need to point out in that aspect is also that the evacuation of Nigerians from Sudan was basically a private initiative that ended up as a public-private partnership. So I don't know whether you know the Airpeace in Nigeria. There's an airline called Airpeace in Nigeria. And this airline, the owner, Godwin Oyema, was able to coordinate, with the Egyptians and perhaps some people within the government ministry to, for free, evacuate Nigerians, from Sudan. I think this is also commendable, to say that in crisis reading context, the narratives are not only just the negatives that we should project or flaunt. There are also some very important cues when it comes to compassion and humane nature of even private individuals or private organizations that try to mediate when it comes to these challenges. Do you have any experience with the Ghanaian students in Sudan?
Yes,
Or would you? Yeah.
I think also a flight was organized for the Ghanaian students in Sudan to evacuate them, but I think it was after a lot of public outcry before the government did something about it. So I would say government response was quite slow. Yeah. And always, this is one problem with Africa. Whenever there's conflict somewhere, they always wait for the Western powers and advanced countries to take the initiative in evacuating their people before African governments. And I think this is something the continent, the governments on the continent should really take into consideration, because it's within our territory. So if there should be evacuation, I think we should be rather more proactive. And wait for Western nations to evacuate their people before we also come in with that initiative to. It does not speak well of Africa as a continent and individual countries on the continent.
I would let me draw from your own. So in terms of looking at what we can do differently, even when it comes to this evacuation, I wanted to ask, as a foreign student yourself, if let's say there's an emergency in Hong Kong at the moment, what will currently be your options when it comes to like leaving the country to safety?
Unfortunately for me, I think it's more of each man for himself, God for us all.
Seriously, yeah. So there's no like African association organization of Ghanaian students in Hong Kong at the moment. Is it like outlawed or something?
Yes, we do have it's vibrant, but from a political standpoint, the organization does not have that kind of clout to organize an evacuation if there need to be. I think what it can only do is maybe to appeal through social media to the government.
Wow.
For something to be done, but it does not have that, like a governmental backing. Yeah, so we just pray that nothing happens, because in case of crisis, as I said, it will be very catastrophic in my candid opinion.
Yeah, but I was looking at, okay, so there's no connection with the there should be some representation of government, let's say through the ambassadors or some diplomatic cover. So, and I'm expecting, so my expectation is that such an organization could also have had like a link, at least to invite maybe the ambassador in Ghana, the ambassador of Ghana in Hong Kong, or the Nigerian ambassador in Hong Kong to some of the. So in this association, so are you talking of let's even start from the nature of the association. So do you have it like on a national scale or a continental scale? And what I mean is that, are you talking about a Ghanaian association of an association of Ghanaian students in Hong Kong, or an African association of for students in general? What obtains, Yeah.
I think what I know is we have in fact there are a lot of Ghanaian students here. We are the majority when it comes to foreign students in Hong Kong. So we have this association. Yes, it's a very strong association where sometimes they invite the charge d'affaires in Hong Kong to speak to us on issues of foreign affairs and issues of passport and those kind of. Yes, we do have that, but the extent to which the organization will have or could marshal some force to as it were compel the government to evacuate the students within the shortest possible time, I don't believe the organization has that power. But on a normal talking to us, the charge of coming to talk to us, they do it. And I think there's also an association of Africa, it's more of Africans in Hong Kong, but it's not, I don't think it's well organized. I think at the end of the year, they meet to have a party, talk, get to know, chit chat. Because apart from the Ghanaian students, and there are some Nigerian students also here, but there are not many, very few. Yes, and there are a lot of Africans here who are not students, who are working. This kind of many jobs. So it's difficult to bring these educated people, students, to mix with most of these people who are respectfully say maybe not too
Yeah.
educated. So
Yeah.
I don't really see much like in terms of organizing forums or programs for the entire African community here. So
Yeah.
it's more of meeting at the end of the year. Yes, it's not too strong. It's not too
Yeah, so
strong.
I don't know why you see it, but what I would have thought is that a government initiative in gathering these people together may have been the best option, in understanding or managing some of this crisis response situation. But in the absence of that, do you think, like, I know you've spoken about the difficulty of bringing people together when it comes to like your skill set, or even your class in the society, or even your worldview. Of course, these things are intertwined. But for the sake of synergy of
Mhm.
action, what would you think from your experience would have been feasible when it comes to like evacuating foreign nationals? I mean, not talking of only the Hong Kong. If you were to be like if you are to be like charged to say like, okay, create a template for us to follow when it comes to like evacuating our own nationals, what should have been, what do you think would have been better? And I'm asking this because you're part of this experience. You live on a daily basis, of course, in a society that may not also be very friendly towards integration of foreigners, in the society. I don't know what Hong Kong is, but I'm trying to judge it from the Chinese, from what I know of China, you know. But so what would you have advised to say, okay, when war breaks out, these are the steps that I think would have helped to rescue as many people from danger as possible.
Yeah. I think the best, Hong Kong is an island and it's linked to China. So I think
Yeah,
the 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 best possible option in case of evacuation when there's a crisis is to move everyone to China rather, because it's very short just by train
yeah,
and
yeah,
buses here. So the first
yeah,
point of all is for the Ghana embassy in Beijing, which is more represents the government to evacuate the Ghanaian students, or if from or maybe on a larger scale, the Africans, maybe if it's a collective something from African government to
yeah.
China, to Beijing. From there, it can organize maybe flights for different people from different countries. But I think the Chinese they affair here, it's a very small office, and I don't think they have
Okay.
much political power. So I think
Mm,
there should be an avenue or a plan to, in case there's an emergency, to evacuate straight to mainland, and then from there, I think the the next possible option of organizing flights will
getting
be
them to, yeah.
yes.
So in fact, my question is actually to see how the Charge Affairs could have carried this out, because I'm thinking more of creating like a better rhythm between the association, you know, and the Charge Affairs for better coordination, not just for emergency situation, even for day-to-day challenges that some students may, or some nationals may face, you know, in in Hong Kong, in this case, or in the foreign land. Because if there's no synergy, then it's a bit more difficult to plan. Because, and this is why I'm saying it, what I've noticed within the Nigerian situation is that because there seems to have not been a form of communication or collaboration between the key stakeholders in Sudan, then there had to be a lot of um, um, disagreement, not disagreement. There had to be a lot of negotiation. I think that's a better word to use, to trade concessions, to approval of budgets. People who are not approving, how many people are there, how many people are they going to take care of, how many buses would they need, all those kinds of things. But if there had been like a sort of like constant communication, interaction, synergy, a database of the nationals, regular events between the embassies and these people who are carrying out their businesses or education in a foreign country, perhaps it would have been in one way, it would have been easier to create like
Exactly.
a joint negotiation, between them and the national government, who in this case may also collaborate with a private institution, in our own case, a private airline, to evacuate the students and relieve them of their worries. So this is just my own way of saying, okay, looking forward, these are the kind of possibilities that
Yes.
we can have. I don't know what your perspective is on
Yeah,
that as well.
Professor, it's well noted. But I think one
Yeah.
thing from my observation, there's something I find a little problematic.
Yeah.
Some of the the offices of the various African governments here, the charges they affairs, they are not Africans. I think
Ah.
some of them are employed, they are Hong Kongers who have
Mm,
been given that diplomatic status. So, and I feel, well, they may not be really empathetic to the African culture. I'm just being,
yeah.
I'm not being, I'm not saying they are not, but because I think maybe they are not Africans, they may not really have that compassion in case there's some
Yeah.
crisis. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that is also, it should be more
So
of
what
African
so maybe
thinking.
I think I mix it up, and I will need some education on that. What is the role of the charge d'affaires?
You know,
That
they serve as, they also serve as, let's say, mini ambassadors. They serve as, they represent the countries here in Hong Kong. It's China is the main country. Hong Kong
yeah.
is a metropolis. So
Yeah.
they represent the various African governments here. Okay,
Ah,
so
ah.
yeah,
That
that is,
sounds very funny. So you have like an Hong Kongan representing the Ghanaian president in Hong Kong,
yeah, not
liaising
just,
with the,
yeah,
you
a
know,
lot of African countries. Yeah, a lot of
yeah,
I got to know this. I got to know this during my studies because
yeah,
I want to interview some people from, I wanted to interview the ambassador from Mali. So I thought the ambassador would be a Malian. So when
yeah.
I checked the website, I realized the person is an honorary ambassador charging the affair from Senegal, but it's a Hong Konger. And I realized, yeah, it's interesting, but that's the reality.
Okay, man, this is also something that we should point out, when it comes to, but okay, but if, let's say, if you were to go to Beijing, for instance, then
Mhm.
you'll have been able to meet with the representatives of Ghana as Ghanaians, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, okay. So this is so in a state. I think this is something that we should also bring out, in our communique, to say that there are some peculiar situations where, for instance, in China, where you're vouching for, or you're pushing for one China, but within some independent, um, you called it a metropolis, but
Yes. Yes. It's
yeah. So I think that's from the Chinese perspective. But if you were to talk as a Ghanaian, would you consider Hong Kong a metropolis of China, or Hong Kong as an independent country of its own?
no. Hong Kong is not independent. Hong Kong is
Okay,
not in the,
okay,
yes. The reality is, there's this tension. The citizens would want see themselves as Hong Kongers rather than being Chinese, but they are
mm,
ethnic Chinese, but they don't want to be
yeah,
called Chinese.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
so yes, but
Okay,
from the political
okay.
dimension, Hong Kong does not have an army. The
Mm,
army here is from the mainland.
China. Okay,
Yes, even
okay.
though they have their own currency, but
Yeah,
and the law and the selection of the chief executive also I think needs approval from the mainland. So
yeah, yeah. I think I
Hong Kong is not
understand.
a country.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
okay.
under the mainland. But the Hong Kongers do not really. It will be quite problematic if you tell a Hong Konger he or she's a Chinese. They'll have problem with
Yeah.
you.
Okay, so the association that you're talking about now, do they have like an affiliation with other associations in the mainland? Because this could also be a point of advocating for synergy. So you can have Ghanaian Association of of students or workers in Hong Kong, but being a branch of the Association of Ghanaians in China in general.
Okay,
Does
that
that kind
I'm
of a
not.
framework exist? Yeah.
No, no, I'm not aware of. I'm not aware. I'm not saying it might not be in existence, but
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
aware. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think given the number of Ghanaian students here and the vibrancy of the institute of the association in terms of us meeting once a while, we tend to know ourselves. So I think it will not be easy to say it's a sub organization of maybe a bigger umbrella. I think they here in Hong Kong, they want to see themselves as an independent Ghanaian African students here rather than affiliated as an affiliate of mainland. I think in mainland they also have their own. I think here it's quite independent here. Yeah.
But so that means you don't have like any direct that you're aware of any direct interaction when there's not like a joint gathering of all because I'm guessing that Taiwan may also have its own, and so but there's no like a joint operational dynamic between this association, and this may also make it complicated when it comes to because I'm thinking that we can push for like I don't know what your view is on that synergy between the different associations, at the regional level, at the national level, so that it's easy to coordinate when it comes to emergency situation.
Yeah, that will be brilliant. But I'll find out from some of the leaders if such a framework exists, and maybe I'm not privy to that.
That's fine. No, it's okay. We can also just put it as part of our communique.
Very well.
Okay, I think we have Perez here. Please, you can come in to talk if you're here. And now I would like to.
Yeah.
Could you speak up?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we didn't know that you joined us. Sorry, actually, we have.
I've been here for. Thank you so much. I've been here for like more than 80 minutes. I was listening, learning. Thank you. We have to apologize because I'm just coming from exams and I had to. I was late. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the discussion so far. I've learned a lot, but I am also sorry to drag you back a bit. I would like to look at this crisis from some perspective. I won't number them, but I will just say as I go on. First of all, the failure of or the absence of humanitarian responsibility of African states. I see that as something that was very, very, it's a mistake that keeps, not really a mistake, but it is a flaw that keeps repeating itself. Whenever there is, we saw the one that happened in Ukraine, the way African nationals, Nigerians, and other African nationals were treated. We saw this one also again. We saw about, was it when they had the Libyan war? We saw that one also then. We seem not to be learning from this. And I don't know, the governments, I think one of the responsibilities, because some time ago I was reading part of the German consular law, and evacuation of nationals is an aspect of even national security. It's an aspect of the care you take of your citizens. But in African, when it comes to African states, it is all man for himself, God is our father. All man for himself, God is our father. Now, there are supposed to be three stages when it comes to an issue like this. The intelligence of whether the embassy, the African embassy, the African country embassy there, whether it's Zambia, Ghanaian, Nigerian, that is in Sudan, for example. The first warning they give to citizens are, if you can leave the country, leave the country. When the fighting is supposed to start, the next they do is to organize the evacuation of the citizens first before you can now remove most of the diplomats. But that is not done. It is always not done. We always have to fend for ourselves, or thanks to social media, people have to make a lot of noise, a lot of feeling of national ego. They're not like, okay, let's just try to see what we can do. That's one angle. The second angle I'm still trying to look at is I think there is a I'm going to use the Chinese formula. You know, normally some people always criticize state paternalism, that when the state behaves like a father, the states try to get. But I think the Chinese have shown us something unique. It happened in Libya. It happened in Ukraine. It happened again now in what's it called? Sudan. Yes. What they do, I came to understand that they have a particular system. They call it, I think, it's also state paternalism, really. But I think they call it Fumungwa or something like that. As in, the state is your father and your mother. The state is your father. Yeah, Fumungwa. Yeah, the state authorities are father mother officials. So whatever is happening to a Chinese citizen, especially in case of war like this, the state goes there and shows it. It shows that. So this is one of the benefits of state paternalism, as against what the West will talk about sometimes. But it shows again the effort or the use of a navy. Now, what I'm going to say is this. Whenever the Indians proved it also this time, it was amazing. The Saudis did it again. It was amazing. African countries, especially the bigger countries like you're talking of Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, these are countries with big militaries. Egypt, they failed in that regard. We can see this from the Saudis. The Saudis brought in their navy. They took Yemenis, they took Jordanians, they call it the brotherly diplomacy.
Yeah, so a regional angle to evacuation.
So there should be a regional distance to it, because you cannot be expecting, because whether you like it or not, evacuation is expensive. It's expensive. So the bigger countries can like, okay, why are we brothers? Let's do it. It's all because I know one thing about our governments. It is only when it comes to selfish border wars, and that is when they remember that it is the Berlin Conference that drew the map of Africa. When it comes to helping ourselves, because whether you like it or not, we are Africans. It does not. It's when you are out there, that's when you know that, hey, we are Africans. But we don't do that. But you see, what the Saudis did, I was really impressed, because I followed that aspect of the news. I was looking at it. I saw them. They came. They took Jordanians, took Yemenis, took even some Syrians. I was like, we are not seeing the Sunni Shiite dichotomy here.
Right. Yes.
They packed themselves, because come on, this is war. That's another aspect I tend to look at. Then the other aspect I looked at was that we still lack I don't know how to put it, but is it African Union? We still lack a formidable force to help Africa, in the sense that, just like when we had ECOMOG in West Africa, then that was a success story that time. We are still looking at, they might have some forts, yes, because it was we had no war. We can have some forts there, but I'm still thinking of the AU. If we go, what is happening in Sudan? You have two warlords flexing their muscles over because the country has some resources. Now we are seeing another proxy war in African soil, just like the Russian-Ukraine war. It's a proxy war. There's no Cold War. There's no loud Cold War this time, as we had that day when we had capitalism and communism. But we are now seeing it that these countries have interest, and it is Sudan. And whatever happens in Sudan, it will also affect the other neighboring African countries there, because war, spillovers of refugees, spillovers of rebels, spillovers, weapons will move around. Now, the African Union does not have a formidable force where we can, okay, before we are waiting for United Nations to be calling for ceasefire, we do nothing. Maybe Nigeria will like, I don't want to offend Sudan. This, I don't want to offend. This one, I don't want to offend. But come on, we are all Africans. We are brothers and sisters. We have to stop this whole issue of where two men are flexing their muscles, two elephants are fighting, and the grass is suffering. So those are the particular aspects I saw in this war, because for me, as I read in one of the articles that was posted for us to read before this, and I saw that this whole thing started from Omar Bashir. So you know, all these things, there are consequences. It started from Omar Bashir, and now we're having another warlord, just like what is happening in Libya. Libya is not settled to date. You now have warlords everywhere.
Yes.
It's a problem. It's a problem in Africa because Nigeria. Then when they were talking about Nigeria, they were saying ammunition was coming from Sudan. Was coming from Sudan. Now Mali is already Mali is in serious trouble. Burkina Faso is in serious trouble. The borders of Benin is in serious trouble now because terrorists from Sokoto side in Nigeria they are crossing over to that place. So you see now, okay, now we now have this of Sudan. I mean. So the African Union, what they go to do there, is it just to go to sit down and they answer, well, are this person here? Okay, the Margaret are present. This one here, present. They wave their hands and go back. So I think with this war in Sudan, I mean, it's a lesson. We in the West African bloc of Africa, we might think that, okay, it's mainly the East African bloc that this thing is happening, Northeastern African part, but it is coming closer. And it's a problem. It's a problem. If you look at it very well, look at Ethiopia was a bit relatively peaceful for some time. At the beginning, it was Eritrea. Then those ones just created one state from themselves and they were there. Then Ethiopia, it's like it was relatively okay. Then you have Somalia. For a long time, the war in Somalia has been there.
It's now, still there.
It's still there. And Kenya was having the overflow from it. Sometimes they go to attacking. Now we're having that of Sudan. What is happening? And I remember, I think I was discussing with you, Dr. Philip, some time ago that the Russians, which people, they built it, they are planning a base in Djibouti.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Now, you are saying this war is a proxy war. That's what I'm saying, it's a very, very proxy war because the Chinese are after their investment. So, normally the Chinese, what they do is that they stay neutral. Come on, just try. But you see, the Russians are denying. I think some days ago, they accused the Wagner group, the Russian mercenary group, of being involved. But they said they wrote on their Instagram that they are not involved. They don't know anything about it. But come on, we can't take. Yes, we can't take. We know these guys are mercenaries, and we know how they do their recruitment. And the Americans are looking at it that if the Russian base in Djibouti takes place and is allowed to run, then their interest in Africa. And so they are threatened. And both warlords are supported by these countries. One is supported by Turkey, Turkey, US, UK. The other one has Russian backing. The Chinese are, they are playing their own nice economic diplomacy game. So if you look at it very well, they are taking the proxy war from Europe, from Ukraine. They want to bring it now to Africa. And who are they going to use? Two African warlords. Because whether you like it or not, Sudan has gold. Gold. Exactly. Gold. That gold is because look at Congo. Both of us were discussing about the passing away of Patrice Lumumba. How since Patrice Lumumba has died, no peace in Congo. Gold is there. Uranium is there. Seriously. So we know that this is a proxy war, but being used, we are having two big warlords flying the flags for this war. So I think the African Union, it is. I think how many years now? African Union should be more than 30 years. I think it's be time that we have like a formidable force that can help in the maintenance of peace and order in the region.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is very, very enlightening, Mr. Perez. I think one vital point that you have spoken about is on the regional initiative, or even big countries taking initiatives to help, some other countries that may not may not have the capacity, because it's actually an expensive venture to say that you're trying to evacuate people, from your country. And you also touched on the external actors, which we also spoke about, while you joined us. I'm thinking, for instance, since the the country's president at the moment, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has said that he would only hand over to an elected democratic government. I think some time ago, the French president was also quoted to have said that. I'm trying to link this to global affairs when it comes to the political projection of democracy as the best form of government. Do you think and I'm throwing this to both of you, that democracy, as it's been practiced, is a viable option. Looking at the different warring situations that's been mentioned in some parts of East Africa, some parts of West Africa, and even in other parts, of government losing their legitimacy because democracies have turned out to be more oppressive, in structure, or turned to a bit of an exploitative governance mechanism, in most of these countries. And this had led to the intervention of the military, or even the emergence of some rebel forces to push out government. So so first and foremost, do you think democracy is still sustainable as the best form of government? And if you subscribe to it, how do you think we can best practice a form of democracy that will give us a bit of stability, that we want, on the African continent?
Professor, respectfully, I don't think, I think democracy is not really meant for Africa or for all African states. And yes, and I'll use China as an example. Yeah. China is China now, not on the basis of democracy.
Yeah.
And even in the Western context, none of the Western countries developed through democracy. And someone will say, well, US, if US was democracy, there would have been no slave trade.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think governance should be more of context specific, where it's suited to the cultural dynamics and the social orientation of the people in the country.
Yeah.
Democracy is a borrowed concept from the West. So while I don't have an alternative to democracy, I think African states should come up with a governance system that better suits their condition, rather than impose someone else's rules and regulations in terms of how to democratize on the whole continent. And I'll give an example. Before colonialism, there were rulers within our local communities. There were ethnic rulers, tribal rulers. Yes. Yeah. So democracy comes, and these kind of leaders still have hold on their societies. So practicing democracy and these local chiefs or kings also having some level with their people, I think there's a serious mix up. In the West, they don't have this kind of dynamics in their governance system. Yeah, so I think Africa needs its own governance structure that is context specific to the needs of Africa. And Professor, I want to say something Perez said that was so important. I think he spoke my mind when he brought AU into his submission. AU has a crisis response mechanism, but it's a failure. Yes, and AU is funded by external benevolence.
Yeah.
So AU does not have material capability or capacity in terms of military force and in terms of finances. So
exactly.
So it will always be a puppet of the West. And when we look at the Libyan crisis, AU as a continental body stood by while the West came in to destabilize Sudan. Yeah. And they did nothing about it.
Yeah.
The fall of Sudan was a reason for the supply of armament to Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and all the terrorist groups. The fall of Sudan, the fall of Libya was also the cause of this problem of migration in Africa. Yeah. So I think AU as a continental body, I would say it's in my view, I would say it's a white elephant. Yes. So, yeah, because when the continent needs it the most, it fails to show up. And I think in Sudan, come back to Sudan, I think the democracy cannot work in Sudan. I think one thing is in the Arab world, religion mixes up with governance.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So the idea of democracy does not really sit well with the religious creed of the Arab world. Yeah, so it will be erroneous to impose, US tried this in Afghanistan, in Iraq, it did not work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it should be something that meets that these people are familiar with. They hold more allegiance to their clans, the leaders of their clans, than the national identity.
Yeah.
So I think, and there's no way the West and now the East-West will allow Africa to have its own governance identity, because Africa in international relations is more of a pawn in international relations. Africa does not have any leverage when it comes to international relations. So I think Africa will, I don't know, unless there's a paradigm shift in a lot of things, like Africa's dependence on the West, until we are weaned from the benevolence of the West and now the East. I don't think Africa can have a governance system that will be more stable or lasting for peace on the continent.
Yeah, I get it, but the challenge is that Africa is still operating within a global framework, and I totally agree with you that there needs to be a context-specific governance system. But when it comes to international relations, for instance, if we were to revert back to the cultural system of governance, which I think events have overtaken, it could be a bit difficult to create a national scale, of operation. Even though when you talk about federal or true federalism, you're talking of independence of these different arms or different zones or different provinces or whatever counties or whatever you want to label the divisions within the country, having a stake. And if you ask me, I don't think that democracy is actually a foreign concept to Africa when you talk about representative democracy. I only think that the way in which it was being implemented, even within this local context, is what differs. So, for instance, a monarch will always have a council of chiefs to put him in check, and even if the holding these positions could be projected as hereditary or having familiar ties, I also know that even certain monarchies, I think it also obtains in the West, are based on rotational principles. So you have different families that have entitlements to the throne, and they take it on a rotational basis. And this gives a bit of um, um, a bit of fairness, if I could put it that way, even if it's not on a very objective on an objective scale. It gives a bit of fairness that people could have access, to power, and it's not only just one person that is dominant, as it's been projected by people that criticize, monarchies. In any case, even in the in an advanced country like the UK, the monarchy is still something that is very strong, as we have seen with the current coronation of the present King of England. So I'm thinking that while it may be difficult to project an alternative to democracy as is practiced at the moment, looking inwards like we've projected, we'll have to also deal with trying to see how we can negotiate a united front, even if it means that certain countries going into smaller fractions to be able to operate, which we also have to do with sharing of resources and other international relations and stuff like that. I think I'll have to hear the voice of my brother Perez on this. Mr. Perez.
Thank you. I quite agree with what both of you have said, because I am one person that believes that democracy as practiced here is not the right system of government for Africa. The reason I said that is, first of all, most of the European states were not, how will I put it now? They did not progress under democracy.
Exactly.
Democracy was for the Greeks. Now, when the Romans even conquered Greece, because I remember in our history class those days, Rome did not want to conquer the Greeks initially. They just felt these guys are bookish people who were having fun and claiming they have wisdom. But let's leave them for some time. Let's leave them. It was when, I've forgotten, one of the nation states in Greece became so adamant. Whether the Sparta, I've forgotten one of them, became so, or Athens, became so adamant in fighting another state. And the Roman Empire felt that, okay, it's like these guys, if we allow disorder in one part of Europe as at what they know then, it might cause a problem for us, because the Romans were about imperial expansion and stability. So when we conquer you, we don't need to change your language. You can be, but you just know that you are a Roman citizen. You can start having a Roman name. You can speak Latin, have your own language, but no problem. Now, it was even when Rome conquered Greece, they were still having their own republicanism, the Roman style. You see how they did not democracy like that. You have a few people who stand in, and that is almost similar to what we have in many African states. Yet we have some monarchs, but the monarchs, they always had a council of chiefs. Now, after that council of chiefs, they had what's it called now? The head of clans, different families. You have a representative. And there was, like, I know very well, I think the Yoruba system, the Yoruba monarch system, some other West African system, there was this kind of a group of chiefs who served as check and balances. So when the monarchy is becoming a kind of absolute monarchy, they knew what to do. Now, when the British and the French came, they came at a time when they were just coming out from monarchy, or they made their monarchy a bit constitutional. That was when they came to Africa. They needed resources. They were poor. After fighting the 100 Years' War in Europe and 30 Years' War, this was fighting religious war between Catholics and Protestants, they needed resources. You had Spain fighting against, what was it called? England, for supremacy over the sea. Portugal, all of them, they came to Africa. Okay, fine. They came to Africa. They made us think that, no, these people, you can't, there's a new form of government you would use. They grouped city-states, nation-states into blocks, into countries for their economic gain. And we thought that Western practice democracy would be the best form of government for Africa, without taking into cognizance the different peculiarities of different regions in Africa. Exactly. And that is the problem. So that's the problem we are still having. Like he said, China, they are not doing democracy. They have their own system of government, and they are still using, they have capitalism in business, but that does not govern how they do other things. So even America, we are talking about, America's democracy is different. Just their presidential system is different. They have a very powerful president, but they still have institutions that keep the president from becoming a madman that will just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to press this button. But in Africa, it was not like that. We had the institution of the big man. One problem I have in African system of government is, I'm about to have a call, sorry. Hold on. Okay, one problem I have with our system of governance was that if the nationalists who fought after independence, the Kwame Nkrumah, the Nnamdi Azikiwe, Bafemi Awolowo, the Amilcar Cabral, those men, I believe if they were allowed to continue with their own kind of democracy, which I knew at that time that they had respect for the traditional institutions, would have been far better than what we have, because the CIA and the British people, they all came, they sponsored coup around Africa to unseat this whole thing. And that is where the whole problem came in, because most of these are former military officers who were trained in Sandhurst in the UK. The impression they have about governments, one man being on top, the big man. And that is what has affected African democracy since that time. So it's not the case of, we're not doing democracy based on the peculiarity of our situation. We are doing democracy based on the notebook that they gave us from London or from Washington. That's okay. The notebook. Oh,
Copy and paste.
so thank you. So it's mostly about elections, and that's all. Nothing about governance. It's about elections. It's about elections. About the respect for the human person. That's why I believe I quite agree with what we are saying here. That if we want to have a good political system, we have to, like he said earlier, that there are some states that cannot be that cannot have democracy. Leave them. Let them have monarchy. Yes, those states, especially these Arab states, it is their way. And if you go, I was discussing with a friend of mine that day from what's the name of this country? From Iran. And he told me, he said, Iran was formerly a democracy, but it was the same America that came and sponsored this, what's it called, Islamist guys to topple the government because that other man was coming with some reforms. Come on, let's have Iranian identity. We don't have to be doing pro-Western things. Yes, we can be liberal, fine, but let's be Iranians. They came and brought in people who were crazy about the religion. And now you're not telling the same people that, no, these people have gone beyond their bounds. The same America supported the Mujahideens against the Soviets in 1989 in Afghanistan. They are not coming back and saying, no, they are terrorists. They're terrorists. They are maltreating women. But you all knew that this was in their manual. So what I think is that African states should be allowed to cook their own political system. If we are going to take in democratic principles, fine. The main values we have as Africans, we know it. Respect for human life, respect for elders, respect for your family, communal life, sharing of all those things.
Environment.
What about the environment? So now let's see how we can blend this into our own form of democracy, because whether you like it or not, there is no pure democracy like the Greek democracy anymore, where the male, the father of every family, we have to sit down because they were small city states. Yes, they were small cities that they will sit down, they will argue and argue. This one always up his hand. We can't have it anymore. God has blessed Africa with population. It's not possible. If they are going to do it in a country, how many heads of families will be there? So I think we should have our African values. Fine. We can look at the democratic principles, because what I see in Africa is that what we are doing as democracy is elections, 4-year tenure, we go back. After we have, what's it called, House of Senate, House of Representatives, House of Parliament, or whatever, they discuss, then the West will come and say, okay, give us AIDS. We'll give you AIDS if you legalize this, if you legalize that. That's not democracy anymore. It's not democracy. So I think I quite agree with what all of us we are saying here, that the democracy they are telling us, it will not work in Africa. Because look at it this way. They use one mouth to tell Africa, promote democracy. But when they go to the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they don't talk about democracy. Because the form of democracy they give, they are perpetrating in Africa, keeps Africa on our knees. And it's not supposed to be so. It keeps us on our knees. So if we look at, I think that is why I'm not so happy with what I see, that they removed history from schools, in some schools, in some African states for some time. I was lucky to have read the speech of Kwame Nkrumah, the speech of Nnamdi Azikiwe. I read what's it called? Obafemi Awolowo's books. I read something Amika Canberra. These old guys, and I saw that this man, yes, the West accused men of being Marxist. That was the name those days. Once they see that, once they see that you are for your country, you are trying to push that Pan-African this thing, the next thing they say, communist, Marxist. And immediately some countries then, like France did not need to hear any other thing. Once the English people and the British and the Americans the British mentioned is a Marxist, the Americans will say communist. The French will, let's see how to remove him out of office. So I think, because if you look at it very well, the way the world is going with the rise of an alternative world order, which China and Russia, which China and Russia are trying to push now, which they are trying to get now, I think with that, this whole interference in African political affairs, it will not last as it was rather before. Because people are now seeing that, yes, there's an alternative. The Chinese are coming in, and they are not doing like the Americans, and they are bringing results. Yes, we might say they have their own, because what I like to know, this world is run on interest. They have their own interest. But it is better that they don't tell you to vote into power. They don't tell you if you don't do this, we will do this. Their own is just about their business. They come in their own way. It is flawed, yes, but people are seeing an alternative. So I think, and I agree, that it's not possible to see democracy is working in Africa, and it can't work, except it is bent to suit African values and African peculiarity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for that elaborate exploration. And as you were talking, I just remembered I was listening to an ex-nun yesterday, Karen Armstrong, who describes herself as a freelance monotheist these days, you know. And one point that she was making, she had an interview with Samantha on Al Jazeera. So I was watching it on Facebook, I think. And she was saying that after the Roman Empire, the Europe was actually like an arid land, an empty space, you know, it was void, you know, when it comes to political experience, until it came in contact with Islam. This was, and so she was emphasizing that because she's an Islamic historian. And the point she was trying to make is that the template of Islam as a religion is not just a theoretical doctrinal approach that only stipulates that, okay, this is God, this is what you have to do, your personal relationship with God and spirituality and self. No, the point she made was that Islam has to do with a sort of kenosis, you know, which is a theological term, which is self-emptying, you know, living and related to Christ when you leave your Godhead and become man. And our interpretation of that is that Islam is a pragmatic religion. You know, you may have a lot of things to say about Islam and its foundation, but the point that she was trying to make, and I think is relevant to our discussion, is that that religion of Islam gave stipulations that made you want to intervene in affairs of the society. It was not isolated from the society. It was not just you in your personal space communing with an abstract being, you know, who in this case is the supreme being, but it's like representing that supreme being in the life of every individual. And I'm trying to link this to Kwesi's point when he was talking about how it may be difficult, you know, for democracy to work in certain contexts where religion has been superimposed on the political runnings of the country. And so I think rather than outrightly condemning or stereotyping practices and religions as not being okay, I think what is important for us to know is that, or the point that she was trying to make is that, why not let us look at the values and the positives of this religion and perhaps incorporate it into, you know, the way that we're able to devise a way forward, you know, in terms of getting political stability, you know, in Africa. Kwesi, I don't know whether I think we lost Perez for a while, but do you have like some last words? We've spent more than enough time, so I wanted to ask you to have like some last words to say. Sorry, I know perhaps we are keeping you up at the moment. You're supposed to be in bed by now.
No problem, Professor. I think it's been very educative, and I hope we have it again.
Yeah.
In the shortest possible time. Very educative program. Very educative.
Okay. Yeah. So
and thank you so much for the discussion.
Yeah. Just